SOTA CBD products are scientifically proven and dermatologist approved to help with insomnia, overexposure to outside environmental elements, and other inflammatory issues. Scientific research is the starting point for every product they make, and SOTA products are formulated to specifically address sleep and anxiety, environmental damage, as well as inflammation and pain, both systemically and topically. SOTA CBD is purposeful in providing scientifically studied ingredients that are proven to work and then infused with CBD to target very specific disease states that many face every day. Go ahead, use coupon code FINDINGGENIUS, all one word, for a 25% discount at checkout. Visit sotacbd.com to shop now. Use code FINDINGGENIUS.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Matthew Colan. He's the co-founder of a company called SOTA CBD, SOTA CBD. Matt, thanks for coming. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm always interested to talk to people in the CBD world. What's your background? Like, what prompted you to get into this area?
Sure. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for having me. And I also wanted to apologize that I had intended to get product to you, and I have just been crazy busy this month. And so it just kind of fell by the wayside. So my goal is to get you some product here, hopefully this week. So again, I just wanted to say, say thanks. And I will definitely get you some product so that you can try for yourself. But to go back to your question, so what got me into this was back in 2015, I think it was, I got into a car accident, and it wasn't like a debilitating car accident, but I had a lower back injury from it. And I had tried some various things. I had cortisone injections. They put me on some medication that I didn't like the way it made me feel. And I happened to have a friend who was a coach at the time for the Cowboys. And he's like, hey, you should try CBD. And I was never a drug user of any kind. And I was uneducated at the time. And I'm like, I don't do that stuff. And they're, no, you really should try it. It's legal, or it's becoming legal, and you should try it. And so I did. I tried it, and it worked for me. And about 30 days, my back pain was pretty much gone. And so my mind went to, well, why is this working? I've tried these other things. Why did this work? And so I started getting into the research of it. And then I was like, maybe I can actually make this, cheaper than where I was buying it from the time, right? And then I got into it even further and was like, oh, maybe there's a business opportunity here. And so I started a CBD company and just started formulating. And then it kind of shifted into a bit of a crusade, because as I got into the business, there was just so much misinformation that was going on that it was frustrating, because I experienced, because I think there's some medicinal value to CBD, but so many people were selling this as it solved everything in the world, and it was frustrating, and they didn't understand how it worked, and it was sort of a money grab. So kind of became a bit of a crusade for me to, educate people and try to get it in the hands of people who actually needed it and could potentially benefit from it, and not be told that it works for something that it's not going to work for. So that's really how I got into the business.
Okay. When you say like within 30 days, your back pain was gone, what did you experience the first use, the second use, the third use? Like, any details? Do you remember what it felt like when you first tried it?
Sure. I mean, when I first tried it, like the first day or two, I didn't notice any change. And so I just kept taking it because I had a 30-day supply. And it was not like taking a pain pill or ibuprofen or anything like that. It was just sort of a kind of a progressive thing where it just slowly, I would wake up and be in less pain. And I wasn't necessarily totally conscious at the same time until I was reaching the end of taking the CBD, or the bottle that I had. And I sort of was like, man, I'm not having the pain that I was having. Like, how is this working? Right? How is this happening? So it was a kind of a progressive, time frame of that pain going away. And of course, then once I started to get into researching it, it makes sense as to why that happened. But yeah, it was not something where I took it day one, day two, and instantly felt relief.
Well, I've tried different kinds. Some say full spectrum. Some say, I forget what some of the other buzzwords are. It's only when I've taken like really, really, really strong CBD, like 3,000 milligrams in a bottle, and you have the eyedropper, then you're like, okay, I can feel it immediately. And I feel calm, but I don't know. My head feels a little bit fuzzy, but it is calming and relaxing. But again, I had to go to like really, really, really powerful stuff in order for it to work. What is some of the research that you found that corroborated your loss of pain? You said the research made sense. So what did you see?
So as I really started to understand the physical part of how it worked in the body, the way CBD works is that the misconception is that it attaches to receptors, or that when you take marijuana as an example, the delta-9 actually attaches to receptors, which is why you get that high feeling. And what we have internally is we have our endocannabinoid system when we have endogenous cannabinoids. And what happens is those two endogenous cannabinoids, or two of the main ones, is 2-AG and anandamide. And what happens is we have these enzymes that we create internally that end up breaking down these neurotransmitter blockers, the endogenous cannabinoids. And so what happens is when you have an overproliferation of inflammation or pain, and your body is producing too much of these enzymes and it's breaking your endogenous cannabinoids down, that's where you start to have, some kind of an immune disease or inflammation or so on and so forth, pain, that kind of stuff. And so when you introduce CBD into the body, what happens is the CBD actually attaches to these enzymes and they get broken down. And then what happens is you start to build up your internal cannabinoids, your endogenous cannabinoids, and they're now allowed to go do their job, which is to attach to the receptors, which helps with the pain and some of these immune diseases, because your body has been allowed to build them up. And that's why it takes time. Now, if you're taking 3,000 milligrams, certainly you're putting enough into your body that you might be able to feel something. But again, what I always tell people, it's different for every person. It's, again, not like taking an ibuprofen, which is a single molecule. It has its job. But there are even people who are predisposed to taking things like ibuprofen. It doesn't work for them. And so, with that buildup of your internal cannabinoids, sometimes you start to feel a benefit that you were not intending to feel, because you were taking it maybe for inflammation, but you end up, like you said, feeling more of a calm. And that is because you're building up that internal cannabinoid system, those endogenous cannabinoids, and they're going and doing their job. And sometimes that ends up resulting in you feeling something that you weren't really intending to feel.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So the mechanism you're talking about is not like a typical drug mechanism. From what I understand, a drug will prevent a molecule, let's say, from being produced or cause it to be produced in excess, but it's pushing the body to do X or Y or not do X or Y. But this sounds like it's clearing debris to allow the body to function normally and have a more normalized inflammatory response, let's say. It's reducing overwhelm, it sounds like, in the body.
Yeah, and the best way that I had heard someone sort of describe this was a physician, is if you think of a baby mobile, that's hanging over the crib, and it's got, all these little tentacles, fingers that are hanging down, right? And if one of those is out of balance, right, and like way down heavily, what happens is sometimes you'll be prescribed a drug, and it is intended to target that specific area, but it can also then result in something else being out of whack. And so then you're taking another drug to help with that. So sometimes you can get into a situation where you're taking multiple drugs because of, the side effects of taking that. Whereas CBD can help you put some of that more into balance. Now, I'm not saying that CBD is going to replace, pharmaceutical drugs by any means. I'm just talking in terms of that's typically what happens when you're taking, a single molecule drug specifically for something, whereas with CBD, it kind of helps you put things into balance. Now, for example, if you have an injury, like CBD is not going to help you with an injury. If you have joint inflammation, it potentially is going to help you with that. But if you have physically injured that joint, it's just not going to solve that problem. And that's part of that, I think, misconception sometimes with people is, I feel pain. Well, okay, but why do you feel the pain? You need to understand why you feel the pain, what's causing the pain before you start really taking anything, in my opinion.
So what have you seen that CBD is?
SOTA CBD products are formulated with scientifically proven and all natural ingredients that a dermatologist approved to help with improving sleep and inflammatory skin diseases to support overall wellness. They're offering our listeners a generous 25% off their first purchase. Use coupon code FINDINGGENIUS. No spaces in there, one word, Finding Genius, to save 25% at checkout site-wide. To do so, visit sotacbd.com. That's SOTACBD.com.
Is very useful for? Like, where do you get really positive feedback from customers, and where do they say it's like, it didn't really do much?
So our number one product is sleep. So what we have found is that, and here's the other thing about our business is that I often say that we're not a CBD company. We just have products that have CBD in it, because the reality is you can buy CBD anywhere. And so what's done is I have gone out and done a tremendous amount of research and studied ingredients that have also been studied for specific ailments, like sleep as an example. And what we found is that when you pair CBD with these other well-studied ingredients, that you get this synergistic effect that works really well, and CBD tends to potentiate or make things stronger. So, for example, if you're taking blood thinners, you probably shouldn't be taking CBD because it can create too much of an effect. So that's why it's always important, if you're on other drugs, to talk to physicians, antipsychotics, things like that, before you take CBD, because it can potentiate things. And so sleep has been our number one product. We have people that have been on Ambien that have gotten off of Ambien, people that, we get, the best part is when I get comments from people who are like, man, I have never slept better. And so we have GABA and melatonin in our sleep product. And GABA is a natural neurotransmitter that your body produces, and it's intended to kind of turn your brain off at night. And so, we are bringing in an outside GABA, and there's debate about the blood-brain barrier, that it passing the blood-brain barrier. But the reality is what we are seeing is people are really benefiting from this. And so the melatonin really tells you it's time to go to sleep. The GABA helps you stay asleep, sort of turn your mind off. And then the CBD helps you to relax and stay asleep, and potentiates sort of all those other ingredients. And what ends up happening is you get into these deep sleeps. And what we find is that people have these really vivid dreams that you can remember, which before I started taking our sleep product, I could never remember my dreams. And when I take it now, it's amazing. And the other thing that we have found that CBD works really well for is with skin issues. And so one of our best products is our retinol, which is our night cream. And most people, they really can't handle more than 0.5 to 1% of a retinol, which is vitamin A, and it's used to sort of slough off dead skin. And what happens is it can cause irritation, get red, and you get some scaling and things like that. And what the CBD does is it goes in and it reduces all of that redness. So our retinol has a 2.5% retinol in it, which is the most you can get without a prescription. And we've had fantastic results, and we have a ton of dermatologists that, sell our product in their offices, and they love it. And because it's an alternative to, a prescription-based retinol, which, they have their place, for certain patients. And this is just an alternative that they can have for those who, are looking for something maybe a little bit cheaper or not prescription strength. So those are two of the main benefits that we have really seen with CBD.
How about the method of administration? Creams that you rub into your skin versus tinctures that you take an eyedropper full of, and versus, let's say, edible type things. What have you found are like preferred or better types of administration for CBD and other products you have?
Yeah. So we do tinctures and topicals. Now, the tinctures really the quickest way to get CBD in your body, to be honest with you, is a suppository. Not a popular choice for people. And the second would be vaping and ingesting it through your lungs. And then the third would be underneath your tongue. And so if you're looking for something that's going to help with inflammation or pain that you're experiencing, in your joints and things like that, the tincture is really the best route that you can go to help build up that internal cannabinoid system and those endogenous cannabinoids. With the topicals, we're really treating topical treatments. And one of the misconceptions out there is that, people were saying, hey, yeah, rub this on your joint and, you're targeting a specific area with CBD. And the reality is, unless there is some transdermal ingredient, which breaks down that stratum corneum, there's no way that the CBD can actually penetrate through your skin. Now, some people will tell you, well, I don't care what you say, it works for me. And what I would say to you is, great, then keep doing it. It's just, that's the placebo effect that exists, which, by the way, with every drug that's manufactured, there is a placebo effect. And, the mind is a very powerful thing. So I would never tell someone stop doing it. It's just from a scientific, physical perspective, you're not getting CBD into your bloodstream unless there is some transdermal ingredient. And now patches is an example. Most of the time a patch would have to have, and that's what they use for drug delivery, right? They do have patches and they have a transdermal component to it that breaks down that stratum corneum, which is that first layer of skin that, it's really it's your shield, right? It's like when you jump into the lake and, you don't get sick from being in the lake, or, when you put lotions on, that the smells and things like that, they don't penetrate into your skin. And, so that's one thing that, we found is really trying to educate people on using it for the right reasons and not using it as a topical to get CBD into your bloodstream, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I could see, first of all, my suppository wouldn't be popular. But okay. Yeah, no, this is really interesting. I like how you're really getting deep into this. I've spoken to a number of CBD purveyors, and they usually don't get into these details. So definitely sounds like you've done a lot of research and testing, and you guys are really up on what's working and what's not. So I really appreciate that. If you would, what are some common terms that people hear in the marketplace that they may not understand? Like I've seen broad spectrum, full spectrum, I don't know, all kinds of other stuff. And I'm just confused by it. So I don't know if you can explain.
Yeah, there is a number of terms out there. And, when you start getting into full spectrum, which is CBD that also has THC in it, now it has to have 0.3% or less in order for it to be legal. And then you start getting into the broad spectrum and the isolate, right? So your isolate is just CBD. And one of the other things that's really interesting about, as we're talking about these, is that the last I knew, now this may have changed recently, but the last I knew, there was no physical way yet to be able to isolate CBD without any delta-9 THC. And so what's interesting about that is when you see products that are out there saying that they are THC free, technically they're really not THC free. What they are is they have a threshold that has been deemed THC, below the amount. Like, as an example, our supplier supplies us with our CBD, and we do nano emulsified, which I'll get into that in a second. But with that, it has 0.01 THC, which you could arguably say that's pretty much zero, right? However, when you look at the amount of nanograms of THC, it's 100 and don't quote me on this, but it's like 137,000 nanograms of THC per 1 milliliter. Now, why is that important? Well, from a drug test perspective, The urine test that is being issued as of today, it tests for only 50 nanograms of THC, and it's only testing for THC. It does not test for, there's THCA and there's other components of THC. So that is why there are some people who can still test positive on a drug test if you're taking it on a regular basis, even if it's a really small amount. And that's one of the things that we've also really tried. Like we don't say any of our products are THC free. If you're a pilot or you have an occupation of any kind that, you're going to be drug tested and you're going to take this on a regular basis, we always tell people, well, you're taking this at your own risk and we don't recommend it. And we did some of our own testing, and my one business partner, after 6 months now, he was taking high amounts of CBD, like 1,500 plus milligrams a day. And he did test positive. It was a very faint, but in the eyes of the testing, it doesn't really matter, right? And so I think it's a really important point to get out there to people is, just be cognizant of what THC free really means. Now, someday I do believe, because they are starting to figure out how to biosynthesize CBD, which is very similar to like vitamin C and some of these other ingredients that are out there. Like, we can't produce enough fruit to make enough of vitamin C in the world. So it's biosynthesized. So, someday we will have a single molecule CBD, which, opens the door to, I think, a whole new ballgame of, like drinks and food and some of that other stuff. I know they're already using it now, but the FDA and some of that might loosen up a little bit if they can figure out a way to commercialize the biosynthesis of CBD. So I don't know if I answered your question there about, some of the terms, but, hopefully that clears up some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think just because people are surrounded by CBD everywhere lately, and like you said, people are claiming it can do anything, highly doubt it can't be true. So I'm just wondering, as consumers, how do people know, I should choose this CBD over that one, et cetera? That's why I was looking for that guidance on terms and to understand.
And so, kind of going back to like the term. So now what we use is nano-emulsified CBD. And what that basically is where it's broken down. So all CBD is an oil, right? And in its natural form, it's a rather large molecule. So it makes it difficult to go through the first pass, which is where it has to go through the liver to be metabolized. So when you use nano-emulsified CBD, it breaks that down into a much smaller molecule. So that allows it, when you put it underneath your tongue, as well as whatever you ingest into your stomach and into the lining of your intestine, it can actually move past the first layer of or the first pass of going through the liver. And so you get more of that into your system. And there's been talk about there with the full spectrum, where you have some THC in there and you having the synergistic effect and all of that. I'm not going to argue whether that works or not. We don't focus on whether or not we're broad spectrum or full spectrum, because we're adding nano-emulsified CBD that is added to a bunch of other ingredients that we know work for these particular ailments. And so we specifically focus on nano-emulsified. We try to have the least amount of THC in there, simply because we do not want people to test positive if they're taking this in any way for drugs at some point in the future. Now, hopefully some of that starts changing down the road, but when you're looking at products, I would look at more of the broad spectrum and the distillate, things like that. People who use nano-emulsified CBD, in my opinion, is going to be more beneficial to you.
Well, very good. So how can people get SOTA CBD? Is it just online? Is it in stores yet? Where can people go to get it?
Yeah, so we sell online through, you can go to sotacbd.com or sotahealth.com. And then we primarily sell through physicians. So we have a number of dermatologists in the DFW area in Texas, and a few pain management physicians, a couple chiropractors. So we've really tried to focus on targeting physicians, because they have expressed interest in wanting an alternative for those patients who either don't want prescription medication or just looking for an alternative themselves. And we've gotten a lot of really great feedback on our topicals, and the dermatologist also loves the sleep product, because the reality is when it comes to healing, sleep is probably number one or number two up there in terms of the most effective form of treatment. And if you can get a restful sleep, it just compounds the ability for the body to heal much faster.
Well, very good, Matt. So what's the website people should go to, and where should they go to find out more about you and the products?
Yeah, so you can go to www.sotacbd.com or SOTA Health, that's SOTA, and then health.com. And you can go to, your physician, see if they sell it. We have a list of physicians on our website. And if you want to go learn more about me, you can always go out to LinkedIn, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And yeah.
Very good. Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. And if people have any questions, they can always shoot me an email. You can email me at matt@sotacbd.com, and more than happy to answer any questions. And appreciate you having me on and sharing our products.
Remember, before you go, ask yourself, do you want better sleep? How about better overall skin? Using SOTA CBD products is one of the best things you can do for your overall wellness. Get your CBD-infused products from a company who uses proven scientific research to help support wellness and treat inflammatory skin diseases. SOTA CBD is giving our listeners 25% off their first purchase. Just use coupon code FINDINGGENIUS at checkout. Save 25% site-wide. Go to sotacbd.com to shop. SOTACBD.com.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.